My name is Heather. I am the Adult Services and Programming Librarian here at Howe Library, so I'm in charge of all of our adult programming. If you don't know me, and welcome. Thank you very much for coming. We are tremendously pleased to have Dr. Karen Cangelosi here tonight to kick off our 2013 Everyone is Reading series. And if you haven't read it yet, we do encourage you to read this year's book selection, The Story of Charlotte's Web by Michael Sims. There are copies on the table by the door if you'd like to check one out tonight. You can check one out even if you don't have a library card with us. There's a slip to fill out which you can hand to me at the end of the evening, and you can take it right home with you. I'm sure you're all looking forward to hearing all about spiders, as I am, so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Karen Cangelosi.
Well, thanks everybody for coming out tonight to hear about spiders. And I hope you can hear me. Is that better now that we have the mic on? So just let me know if you can't hear me or don't understand something I say. I'd love for things to be interactive, so feel free to interrupt, or you don't even have to raise your hand. You can shout questions out in the middle, okay? So we can have a dialogue instead of me just yakking at you, all right? Does that sound good? Okay, so I'm really happy to be able to talk about spiders because there's so much misinformation about spiders. There's a lot of mythology about spiders, and I love that Heather had that question, like, is it true that these Australian redback spiders can bite through army boots? That's really funny. It's absolutely not true, just to answer that question, as are a lot of other myths. And so I want to start with a myth as a way of introducing you to what spiders are a little bit and see if anybody's heard of this one. So who's ever heard this one? It's called daddy longlegs are one of the most poisonous spiders, but their fangs are too short to bite you. Anybody heard this one? Okay, cool. So complete trash, right? This is just really silly. Been going around for years, and it's wrong on a couple of counts. One is that these daddy longlegs, like this here, first of all, they're not even spiders. Okay, so they don't even produce venoms at all. All right, and the other thing is that there's some spiders that you might call daddy longlegs, and they're definitely not poisonous. Okay, so daddy longlegs aren't spiders or poisonous. In fact, they're scavengers, and they belong to an order of arachnids called Apiliones. And you can tell the difference. They have this one body part, whereas spiders have two. Okay, so they have like a head thorax and then an abdomen. Okay, so Apiliones are known to feed on dead things that they can find. So you wouldn't really need a venom to attack something and kill it if you're not even going after live prey, right? So what's a spider? So the two body parts here, cephalothorax, abdomen, few other parts. I'm not going to bore you with all of the biology here. They have these first appendages called palps on males. They're much more swollen, so you can tell a boy spider from a girl spider because of the palp structure being dark and enlarged. The other thing about spiders is that the legs are attached to the first body part here. So often you see these cartoon drawings and everybody wants to attach the legs to the abdomen. So you know it's anatomically incorrect if it's drawn that way. So spiders all have how many legs? 8 legs, right? So, and in fact, most arachnids have 8 legs, although not all of them. Okay, so what's an arachnid? Well, there's 8 living arachnid orders. You guys remember your classification: kingdom, class, order, family, genus, species, right? So arachnida is a class, okay? And underneath the class are orders. So that's just kind of a hierarchical way of organizing information. And there's 11 different arachnid orders. I've just listed a few that you probably have heard of before. So spiders are one order, and they're in the order Aranea. Scorpions are an order of arachnids, ticks and mites, daddy longlegs, the Apiliones. Okay, and then there's these camel spiders called sulfuges, and there's a bunch of other ones, amblypygids. Anybody seen Harry Potter movie? Those big things that look like, not spiders, they're arachnids, and they're actually not any of one of these orders. They're called amblypygids, and they're a different order of arachnid. Okay, and they're not poisonous either at all. They live in caves, they're really docile, they don't even move a whole lot. We've collected some in Trinidad, and just trying to keep them alive is really tricky. Absolutely not dangerous, not venomous, not poisonous. So, question?
What do lobsters fit in?
Okay, so lobsters are in the same phylum. Okay, arthropods, jointed appendages. So things like Crustaceans fit in that big umbrella. So a lobster is a crustacean. Okay, and so it's not an arachnid. Okay. All right, other questions? Okay, good. All right, so sometimes people call these guys daddy long legs, just in case, just to carry out the possible problem with this myth here. Basement spiders, you may have seen them. Anybody seen these guys in their house? You see them in basements. Absolutely not poisonous, okay? They don't have any, in fact, very, very few spiders. There's 40,000 species of spiders on the planet, roughly. How many are poisonous? Probably less than a dozen. None of them are in New England, okay? Very few are even in this country, okay? Spiders are cool, they're beautiful. This is actually, you can tell by the fingertip here, it's not very big. This is a typical...
You think that's beautiful?
I do think that's beautiful. That's an orb-weaving spider. And you can see my friend Joe Warfel, you can see copy right here, who owns a photography company called The Eighth Eye, does wonderful macro photography. And he writes about what this spider is, and then at the bottom he says, no, it is not biting my finger. See that? Because he thinks, oh, people think spiders bite. That's one myth, that spiders are biting people all the time. How many people think they've been bitten by a spider? Okay, did you see it bite you? No. So spiders have very low propensity to bite. There's very few documented cases of people actually having been bitten by a spider. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about myths and misconceptions. Some of the stuff, information I'm going to talk to you about comes from this website that's produced by Rod Crawford, who's a curator of arachnids at the Burke Museum. And Rod's done a wonderful job of putting some information together here. Here's the website for you. If you missed it now, I can give it to you later too. But so there's a lot of stuff here, but I'm just going to kind of go through. If anything stands out, you say there's all kinds of just plain weird stories. The daddy long leg one being at the top. That you swallow an average of 4 live spiders in your sleep each year. How many people have heard of that one? Okay, so these are all absolutely not true. Everything on the next 3 slides that I'm showing you is completely false. Okay, like humans like to make up stuff about spiders, just crazy stuff like baby spiders are going to explode out of an egg sac, or out of, you get bitten by a spider, then all the babies will hatch out of the womb. You guys heard stuff like that? Crazy stuff. Not true. Totally not true. Completely not true. Anybody have any spider stories for me? That you, besides for the boot one?
Does the females actually not kill the males?
So very rarely. They can, but there's a few of the widow spiders, not necessarily black widows, there's some brown widows, that on occasion may kill the male once in a while, but usually not in nature. You put them in captivity, they're probably more likely to because they're hungry.
Around the web of the spider that I showed you on the picture, there are all these other dead spiders.
Can't hear.
Okay, so she's talking about a photograph that she took of a spider, and around that were a bunch of other dead spiders. Hard to say what's going on there. Spiders will eat other spiders as part of their diet. And they, because they eat other insects and arthropods, anything that comes into their web, they're probably not males though. So hard to say without actually seeing it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So with praying mantises, when they mate, the female bites off the male's head.
They do.
Why would the female kill the male?
So there's a couple of different questions there that, it's a great question, and I use that example when I teach my behavioral ecology class, because there's what we call sort of like the here and now answers to the questions, and then the evolutionary answer to the question. So when they bite off the head of the male, it actually stimulates the nervous system for the male to begin his mating behavior and move his body in a certain way. Okay, and then the long evolutionary answer to the question is that those individuals that did that, actually that male is actually getting more of his genes into future generations by doing that. Okay, and you might say, well, how can you do that? Well, if you think about it, when males, I know we're a little off topic, but when males go around mating, they generally, when they're at the end of their life, they're going to probably die and not mate again anyway. So this way they're helping to feed their young. Okay, because they become a meal for the mother, who that very first meal after she's what's called inseminated is really important. So he helps to pass along his genes by actually sacrificing his body. Isn't that interesting? So there's, again, sort of a short and a long answer to that question. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So myths about dangerous spiders. Oh, you can always tell a spider bite because it leaves 2 punctures. How many people have heard that one? Nonsense, complete nonsense. the fangs of spiders are so close together, you'd never be able to see two separate holes, okay, for most spiders. All right, so how about brown recluse spider? How many people have heard of brown recluse spiders? Terrible, horrible, danger. Okay, so
They keep
Crazy,
showing that
crazy stuff.
in the newspaper.
Do they?
Identify it so you won't,
Ah.
I've only seen it.
they've been showing that in the paper. I'd love to see where they're showing it because that
It
that kind of
was a
stuff just makes me
newspaper
crazy.
online. I
Okay.
don't remember the name of it.
Okay, so.
Sorry.
No, that's fine, that's fine. So obviously I don't have time to go through all of these, but if there's any particular myths or things that you've heard about spiders that you want me to talk more about, let me know and I'll be happy to address it. Yeah.
Yes, there's something about it, brown recluse and being a violin back or something like that. Is
Yeah.
that not true or?
Okay, so I'm going to take extra time just on the brown recluse spider.
Okay.
Okay? All right. In fact, is that the next thing I have up? Oh, I just wanted to go over this. How many people have heard of this? Was an internet hoax. It's going around for years, since 1999, that there's this spider called Arachneus gluteus. Right? For you that don't know, that's the name of the muscle of your backside, right? So apparently it was in some restaurant that didn't even exist. So if you actually checked your facts, my colleague who followed up with the guy that actually posted this hoax said he did it because he wanted to show how gullible people are and how people don't do their fact checking, especially when it comes to the internet, right? So, and then this myth was kind of resurrected in 2003 where they shifted it to North Florida and made the restaurant the Olive Garden. And then they used a real spider name, but this is a spider in India, that doesn't even occur in the US and doesn't even have any, and he isn't poisonous for sure. Okay, so just a hoax. Anything that you ever read that sounds kind of sensationalistic about spiders, that means that it probably is. Okay? All right. So this just in fact, this was, I just got this last week. The American Arachnological Society, which I'm a member, again, it's an academic society. We also have a Facebook page that allows people to post questions and information. And so somebody posted this just like literally 2 weeks ago, that if you get a tattoo, it makes you more attracted to spiders, okay, as opposed to a recent tattoo is probably going to give you a bacterial infection. So people get all kinds of like skin conditions, and they think, oh, it must be a spider. And you run off to the nearest dermatologist, and they can't diagnose it, so they say, oh, it must be a spider. Okay? Dermatologists that have no knowledge about arachnology or how to even identify a spider, or even tell a spider from another kind of arachnid. So don't believe your physician when they tell you it's a spider bite, because they don't know. They just don't know. I can tell you and point you in the direction of experts that will know if you ever have a question about it, but it's so unlikely. Okay, the fact that you're ever going to get bitten by a spider and that spider is going to actually be dangerous to you, you probably have much greater probability of winning the lottery. So go out and buy a ticket, because your probability just in numbers is higher. Okay, or getting struck by lightning like 5 times. All right, so very, very infrequent. Brown recluse spider. Violin. Everybody's heard these scary spiders. So they do have this little violin pattern. So how many people find little brown spiders? I swear it has a violin on the back. You really need a microscope to even see that violin. It's really not the best way to try to determine whether you have a brown recluse spider. These guys are about the size of a quarter. I'll show you some other pictures. So one thing about this spider, it's called Loxosceles reclusa. So it's in the genus Loxosceles. It's reclusive. That's kind of where it gets its species name. So one important thing to know is that, have I been bitten by a brown recluse spider? Well, first of all, where does the spider occur? Here's a distribution map. There are no populations of brown recluse spiders anywhere living in New England. See this map? See where New Hampshire is? New England, Maine, anywhere. No reclusa. Okay? And mostly it's in the Midwest here. Okay? And then there's a few species in the same genus that may or may not have some toxicity to their venom. So what's venomous versus poisonous mean? Okay, so spiders have venoms. Why do spiders have venoms? You guys tell me. Yeah.
To like kill or paralyze animals while they're sucking them dry.
Okay, yep, so, yeah, sorry. So they, to kill what kinds of animals?
Right.
Prey like
Flies.
insects, right? So venoms are evolved to knock out insect nervous systems, not mammalian nervous systems. There's the rare spider that can catch a bird or a mammal, but it's not very common. Okay, so there are some spiders that have been known to be somewhat harmful, and the recluse is one of them. Okay, now if you look at this statistically, My colleague Rick Vetter, who works at the University of California, Riverside, is an expert on recluse spiders, and he fields these kinds of questions all the time, because people swear they've been bitten by a brown recluse spider when they don't even occur anywhere near where you live. And isn't it possible that somebody brought them in on the bananas in the grocery store? Yeah, it's so unlikely, so incredibly unlikely. And even if it did, it's so unlikely to bite you. He tells stories of people that have lived with brown recluses in their houses for years. Like, they tend to be recluses, they hide out in the basement. One woman in Kansas found 2,028 brown recluse spiders in her house over a period of 10 years, family of 4 living there for 10 years, nobody ever bitten by a brown recluse spider in that house. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. The statistical likelihood of being bitten by a brown recluse is so low. Okay, so if you see a little brown spider around here, it's any one of a number of 2,000 different possible wolf spiders. That refers to a family of spiders. There's 2,000 species in that family. None of them are toxic. None of them are venomous. None of them are poisonous. Okay, so spiders are cool, not dangerous, not scary. All right, this is the facts. And so I forgot I put this up here. So yeah, 2,055 in 6 months in her home. Family of 4 living there for 8 years, not one evident bite. Okay, and there's the website. UCR, definitely check out Rick Vetter's website here. He's got lots of great information. He's also a great comedian, but he's got lots of information about the brown recluse. He's published a number of papers in scientific journals about the distribution and about the misdiagnosis of spider bite as brown recluse bite. Okay, so many things like fungal infections, bacterial infections, allergic reactions have been documented to be misdiagnosed as spider bite by lots and lots of physicians. Okay? Yeah?
When the brown recluse spider actually does bite, doesn't it create necrosis?
It can in some people. So even in the number of people that have been bitten, the number of people that have reacted to it is low. So there were 750 documented cases of people actually being bitten by a brown recluse, and like 2 of them presented with any symptoms at all. Okay. But you know somebody that did, right?
A young cousin of mine was traveling, she was living in California, and a group of friends went up to, I don't remember now where it is, Napa Valley in Sonoma.
Okay. Okay.
Stayed in a motel.
California.
She, in that area.
Mhm.
And she was supposedly bitten multiple times. There may have
Okay.
been multiple spiders
Yeah.
in her day.
Okay.
She has had, I think, 13 surgeries.
Yeah. I've heard stories like 13 surgeries from,
And,
so, right. I can't speak to every,
transplant and so
Yeah.
forth. This went over several years' time.
Yeah. So it's hard to say, like, I don't know every case, right? And I don't know everything, but mostly, most of those cases I've heard very similar stories that they can't actually substantiate that it was spiders that had bitten her. Again, you say, did you see them? Did you collect them? Nobody ever collected, saw, or had any evidence or documentation of it being a spider. Because other kinds of things bite even more frequently, like ants bite a lot more frequently, flies bite frequently. Certainly mosquitoes bite us because they want a blood meal. Spiders don't have any propensity to bite humans. So I don't want to speak to the facts of the case. I don't have any knowledge, but I've heard those same kinds of stories, and they tend to get spun in a certain way that perpetuates the mythology about it. Okay, so there can be a necrotic ulcer that can result maybe from a brown recluse bite, and it has happened, but it's so infrequent. Okay, so people talk about like these epidemics of spider bites. That's definitely not true. Are there isolated cases? Maybe.
From a biochemical perspective, how close spider venom or certain spider venoms to snake venoms?
They're not all that similar. I don't know the precise biochemical properties. I mean, certainly spider venoms have, there's a mixture of a lot of proteases in there. They're breaking down proteins because that's how they're digesting their
They
prey.
evolve from salivary, from salivary gland type of things like in reptiles or?
Well, So completely different evolutionary pathways, right? So there may be some sort of convergent evolution in that sense, because the enzymes and the venoms do end up in the fangs that are sort of like salivary glands, but not exactly. And those get injected into prey when they feed on them. And so somebody talked about sucking their prey dry. Well, spiders do pump digestive enzymes into their prey, and all the digestion happens externally. Then they use a pumping stomach to suck that all back in. Okay, so there's not a lot of direct evolutionary link between reptilian venoms and spider venoms, but they're sort of parallel, or what we call analogous or convergent evolution. Okay. All right. So you guys believe me about brown recluse spiders? Okay. All right. So definitely check out Rick Vedder's site, because he's got a lot more statistics for you. And so he talks about, you see these things in the news, like product wound blamed on elusive spider, spider bite terror in California, likely bite by spider changes life. A lot of sensational, a lot of perpetuation of the mythology that kind of keeps people, well, it must be true, I read it in the news. Okay, and then I know somebody that got bitten by a spider, but you trace it back and back and back, and there's just very, very little to no actual documentation for it. Okay, spiders just get a bad rap. Here are some brown recluses, just to show you relative to a size of a quarter. And if you're going to read any academic paper, to read this 2008 one where it really talks about a review of the biological, medical, and psychological aspects of the Loxosceles envenomations. Okay, so this is a really good one. Again, anybody that wants some of this information later, I can let you have time to write it down. Okay. Black widows, the other notorious spider. Widows are terrible. Again, while they can have a venom that may be potentially dangerous to humans, the frequency of bites is so small. Okay, and again, there's no black widows in New England. There's no widow spiders. There are the Electrodectus spiders, of which this is the genus. This is in the genus of. It's a whole set of species, and not just one widow spider. There's a whole bunch of widow spiders and redback spiders, and so not all of them have even any kinds of poisonous venoms at all. The very few that do just bite so infrequently, and then usually they have been not that harmful. You know, there may have been like one death caused by a black widow in the last 20 years in the whole world. Okay, so it's just really infrequent. Again, you'd probably be more chance of getting bitten by a shark when you go swimming in the ocean, which has very low probability too. You guys get in your car and drive down the highway? Much riskier. Much riskier. Yep.
Can you tell us where they are?
So black widow spiders tend to also be kind of Midwestern to west. You can definitely find them in California. I don't have a distribution map with me today. I should have probably gotten one, but I don't have one. And the other, somebody asked me earlier about whether they kill their mates or not, and that's why they're called widow spiders. And again, they have been known to do it, but they don't do it as frequently as you think, given the mythology about it. And there are evolutionary explanations for those species that do. Okay, that tend to feed on males, older males at the end of their life that were going to die anyway. Might as well eat them, right? Okay. So these are purported to be the 3 most dangerous spiders in the world. And the Sydney funnel web spider in Australia. Anybody heard of this one? Super, super deadly. Okay, well, what does deadly mean? You know, deadly would mean that on a regular basis, it's going around killing people more than 10% of the time. Okay, so by that definition, they're absolutely not deadly. Okay, could one maybe kill somebody who's either elderly or young and really sick or something? Maybe. They do have some venoms that can be dangerous, but again, they don't bite very frequently, and even documented cases of bites have not resulted in death. Okay.
What size are they in reality?
The funnel web spiders, those, they can vary. They're probably like a couple inches at most. Okay, Australian redbacks, again, the one that bit through somebody's boots, they don't have fangs strong enough to bite through a boot, but they may have venoms that are stronger than black widows. Okay, so they're known to be somewhat a little bit more dangerous. Electrodectus, but in maculans is the black widow, the redback is Electrodectus cassiloti. Okay, and again, the Brazilian wandering spider, anybody heard of this one? It's supposed to be really poisonous. Again, rare that anybody's ever been bitten, rarer that anybody's gotten sick, even rarer that anybody's actually died. Has it happened? Probably. I mean, there's 7 billion people on the planet. They're going to die. Things are going to happen. but statistically, it's just so low. Okay, so we don't need to be afraid of spiders. Spiders are people are, how do you get rid of spiders in your house? Well, you don't really need to. They're not going to hurt you. They're not going to bite you. They're not going to kill you. You know, if they're messing up your, you know, putting too many cobwebs in the corner, you might want to, you know, swing them away or something, but you don't have to get rid of the spiders in your house. Like, you don't need to call an exterminator to get rid of spiders. Okay, if you just find them annoying, that's your right to find them annoying, but they're not going to harm you. Okay? And some people say, knock the webs down every day and they keep coming back. Well, if you don't take the spider out, it's going to build its web again, right? So you want to get rid of them, your best bet is to kind of hand collect them into little vials and then drive them away from the house so they don't come back in. That might take a while, right? But I would say just don't worry about them. Okay. So Ron Crawford says, from the Burke Museum, most medical conditions blamed on by spiders lack confirmation. Any actual spider was involved in the case, and spider bites of all kinds of rare events, just as I was saying. A lot of conditions are wrongly blamed on spiders. A lot of evidence for this. Again, there's published papers that can show the frequency of this. Okay. Possible for it to bite and cause a death is so unlikely. It doesn't happen in enough cases to justify calling any spider deadly. Okay? All right. But the real truth is, spiders are super cool. Right? This is one of my favorite spiders. This is a really cool spider. Anybody know what kind of spider this is? Okay, so this is a type of jumping spider. And they're not cool, right? Look how beautiful this thing is. This is a beautiful spider, really, really cute spider in the genus Habernatus. This is Habernatus americanus. It lives in California. And very brightly colored. You see it has big eyes. See these big eyes? So a lot of spiders can't see at all, but jumping spiders have amazing vision. Okay, in fact, they can watch television. Okay, and wolf spiders. I can actually show you some video of that. So these guys have bright colorations for all kinds of reasons. I'm going to come back to the jumping spiders in a little bit.
So look before they leave.
Look before they. And I should say this is a really big picture, but this guy could kind of fit on your fingernail. Okay, they're tiny little things on your pinky fingernail. That's how little they are. Okay.
It's not a compound eye?
No, they don't have compound eyes. So insects have compound eyes, which have those multifaceted lenses, and so these guys have simple eyes around the edges, and then they have pretty complex anterior median eyes and lateral eyes that can form images, and see color, and they're just amazing. Okay, so skipping over to the tarantulas for a minute, because tarantulas are super cool too. People think, oh, they must be really dangerous. So why do people think tarantulas are dangerous?
Because they're big and scary.
Okay, and because of Hollywood, right? I mean, movies. They're photogenic, they're big and scary, but in fact, they're so docile and easy to handle, they make great movie actors. So directors and producers put them in movies because you can handle them and they're not going to hurt you, and they can crawl around. They're really, the most danger you have from a tarantula is that they tend to have fibers on their abdomen, you know, like those cactus that have those fine fibers that might get in your skin and itch. That's kind of annoying. So handling tarantulas can lead to that. But they don't bite. Okay, they can bite. They don't have venoms. The tarantulas are in the family Theraphostidae, which is a kind of a primitive family, and they didn't even involve some of the toxic venoms that some of the other spiders have. So could one bite you? Sure. I've never been bitten by one. I have a colleague, Kara Shillington at the University of Michigan, working with tarantulas for years, handled them all the time, never been bitten by a tarantula. Okay, so people that have been bitten say, hey, a bee sting hurts worse than a tarantula bite. Okay, so yeah.
Why would they bite you?
Why would they bite you? Exactly. They might bite defensively. Okay, so you annoy one enough, you know, you like back it into a corner and stick your finger in its chelicera, it's probably going to bite you then. Okay, so, but again, they don't really have a reason to, but an animal will defend itself with a bite. You had a question too?
Can they shoot the quills?
Well, they don't actually shoot them, but they can use the back legs and kind of rub them off. And they do that when they're stressed. So instead of like, I'm going to shoot these quills at you, it's more like, oh, I'm scared and I'm rubbing my body and all these little things are coming off. And so it's an adaptation to a predator gets a tarantula in its mouth and it gets all these little furs in its mouth. It's like, spit it out. So that's kind of what's going on. Does that make sense?
I had a friend that worked in the zoo, and she was telling a story where she was trying to coax it out.
Yeah.
And I guess
Annoying the heck out of it, right?
Got them in her eye.
Well, they can't, like I said, they use the back legs and they rub them off, so Can they go that far? I guess so. I don't know where she was in relation to the tarantula.
I was
It
curious because I guess they're barbed, and so I don't know. It's dramatic stuff. But
Yeah.
I was curious.
So they do have those little, they're called irritating fibers, and they can embed into the skin, and that would hurt worse than the bite. So, and again, these things probably hurt way worse than any tarantula bite. Beautiful animals, so, right? Even you think this is gorgeous. Right? Beautiful, beautiful color. Okay. So, enough about tarantulas. I'm going to tell you some other things about spiders that are really cool. So some spiders build webs, but not all spiders build webs. Okay, so remember we're talking about the order Aeronea. So here's a pretty cool spider. Some don't. This is an example of a wolf spider called Schizocosa. Okay, that's the genus. And can anybody tell whether that's a boy or a girl spider based on something I've said earlier in the evening? Yeah.
It's a boy because of a big swollen like.
Okay, excellent, because of these things called pedipalps right here, okay, that are kind of swollen, that's a male spider. So if you get a spider and you see that, you know you've got a male. And males of this genus have these tufts on their forelegs, which is pretty cool. So that's another way, if you're looking at this kind of species, if you see the tufts on the leg, not all spiders are going to have tufts on their legs. And they use them for courtship dances. So spiders are pretty smart. They have complex behaviors. They're carnivores, and so they have all kinds of interesting behaviors that parallel mammal behaviors. They can be social. They can care for their young. Okay? They have complex communication. They have amazing courtship rituals. So they have a huge variety of behaviors that they exhibit, and they're really, really fascinating animals. So not all spiders build webs, but they do all spin silk. So they all have spinnerets at the end of the abdomen, and they all make silk. And sometimes they just use it to make a little drag line here, like this picture of this spider that's jumped from one part of the leaf to the other. People say, how do you make a web from here to there? Well, you jump, and you leave a drag line behind, you know, just like you're throwing a rope, attach it, go back over, reinforce it a few times, drop again, come down here, right? So if you got the wind to help you, some spiders will stand on the edge of the leaf, stick their abdomen up in the air, produce a little silk, let the wind catch it, then they just reel it out. May go 6, 7, 8, 10. Anybody see a strand of silk like 12, 15 feet? That's how they do it. They need a little breeze or at least a little convection current or something just to carry it. So amazing photography here. This is James Carmichael. I kind of stole this picture from his website, so don't tell him. Educational purpose. Yeah.
Well, I heard about a spider like being moves. How it moves is like it's a light. It's really light and it spins something that helps catch the wind, and then the wind will drop it somewhere else. For moving to new territories. Is that true?
So the spider itself is moving?
Well, yeah.
So spiders, when they disperse, maybe that's what you're thinking of, like when they're really young juveniles, but even adults, if some species are small enough that they can do what's called ballooning. You may have read about that in Charlotte's Web. That's actually true. Okay, so spiders will stand on the top of the edge of a leaf, put a little bit of silk out. They don't actually make a parachute. Okay, they just make a long single strand of silk. And then they can catch the wind and they can disperse for miles. I have a colleague at the University of Florida that's taken airplanes with nets, and they drive around up in the atmosphere just catching anything that's up there, and they get thousands of dispersing spiders that way. Because they catch the wind and they rise high enough in the atmosphere, and they're on these, they can disperse for miles and miles. Do they do that every day? You know, no, but they can go on these long journeys. So you're absolutely right that they can carry themselves up by ballooning.
Well, how does just one long span help them?
Because so big, thick adult spiders is not going to work. They have to be pretty tiny. So the weight of the silk is going to be pretty substantial versus the weight of the spider itself.
But just a strand of silk doesn't have that much like area.
Doesn't seem like it has enough surface area to catch
Yeah.
the wind or something. It's enough for a spider usually. It's enough just sometimes just to get up high. And then the wind's doing 99% of the work. Okay? Yeah, so they're not like flying around like insects, but they're up there. There's substantial numbers of them that end up in the currents. Does that convince you? Okay. They're not like parachuting, oh, I'm going to go here, oh, now I'm going to go there. They're kind of at the mercy of air currents. And they control it to a certain extent. So not all webs are orb webs. These are some beautiful spider webs of some species that I do my research with, so I'm kind of showing them off, like the hammock spider. You can tell by their name that. And the filmy dome spider, one of my favorites, beautiful dome-shaped web. Anybody ever seen these guys? They're very common around here in New Hampshire. Go out in the woods in the morning and you'll take a close enough look. Again, a little mist of water can help you. There's so many different kinds of webs. The orb weaving webs are just one family of spider, or maybe two families out of several dozen families that
So what are the
webs.
advantages of either of those webs? Why are they different?
Okay, so that's a great question. So each web is kind of constructed for a different purpose. And these kinds of webs are referred to as sheet webs. So hammock spiders have the sheet as a hammock shape, but there's a whole lot of barrier silking up here that you may or may not be able to see. So insects tend to fly into the barrier, and then they get deflected down. They fall to the top of the sheet. Spider runs out of a retreat and grabs it. Okay? The dome spider kind of does the same thing. It sits right under the dome, and then the prey fall usually into the barrier area here, fall to the top of the dome. The spider will come up from underneath and pull it through, just cut it right through.
Has anybody looked at the neurology, at the neurological processes that make a spider start to put out a drag line or lay a web out or things like that?
Well, there's been a lot of people that have studied spider neurobiology, right? So as far as the physiological processes that are involved, or?
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, does a spider land go on a branch, and what are the neurological mechanisms that prompt him to put out a web?
Well, probably not that complicated, right? So they're fairly simple invertebrates that will respond to stimuli in the environment. There's a lot of innate behavior. Say, okay, time to build a web, put the silk out, and just respond to currents, substrate, temperature, humidity.
Does anybody recognize a mechanism that, say, if a spider goes on a branch and sees an insect 10 inches away or something, that there is a process by which it, in quotes, thinks that I'm going to lay out a web to trap this insect?
Well, probably not. Like most spiders build their webs way ahead of time, under the anticipation that insects are probably going to come, because they have for so many millennia, right? So it's kind of an evolutionary adaptation to have webs constructed. So these guys usually will build webs and then wait for prey to come.
Right.
Okay, so, and there are instances where spiders can be sensitive to prey availability in the environment. Like if they're not getting any food, they may move their web location. Or hey, there's a lot of food, they're going to hang out there and stay in the same space. So that can determine where they are.
Right.
So they have that level of sort of assessing their environment. Okay? I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but the neurological basis of spider web. Long time ago, there was a guy who gave spiders drugs like LSD and caffeine. They gave them caffeine and they built these crazy webs, right? They gave them LSD and they built a perfect web, even more perfect than a normal web. It's really kind of interesting. What does that prove? Who knows, really, other than they're just kind of disrupting the neurological system of the spider, and it's not really that instructive, but people that have looked at how the nervous system of the spider works may be able to tease out something a little bit more useful out of that.
Well, what do the crazy webs look like? Will they have crazy places? Like, or will they?
Well, he used spiders that built typical spiral webs, those orb webs, and so they didn't build the spiral. It was like all kind of zigzaggy and stuff. It wasn't in a nice circle. All right. Here's another Mullen doily spider in the family Linophiidae, and an invasive European hammock spider. There's a lot of these guys in Acadia National Forest. One of the projects that we have in mind is to take a closer look at these guys because they're starting to displace some of the other native, what are called Linophiid spiders in that area. So some spiders make these really cool web decorations. How many of you guys have seen this spider? It's called the garden spider. Usually about the end of August, beginning of September, I get phone calls. I have the largest, biggest spider you've ever seen in your life, and it's yellow and it's black and it's got this crazy web. And so very typical, very common spiders, late summer, early fall spiders, beautiful spiders. They're not poisonous, not dangerous. Go ahead and pick them up. They're great. Big females. The males are much smaller than the females. So for many, many spiders, females are much, much larger than the males. And I should have said for those black widows, the males are like a 20th of the size of the female. And there's a lot of interesting evolutionary explanations for that, what we call sexual size dimorphism. But these guys put these zigzags in their webs, and there's a huge amount of study that's gone into figuring out what are those web decorations doing. And some studies show that they actually act to deter predators. Like a bird will see that and say, I don't want to fly into that web and get silk all over my face. And other studies have shown that they can actually attract insects by reflecting UV radiation. So if you're a spider, you want to attract insects to your web. So different spiders may be doing it for different reasons. And there's a really wonderful body of literature and a lot of back and forth going on about the function of web decorations. Questions? Okay. So, social spiders are really cool too. Sorry that this picture's so blurry, again, I sort of stole it off the internet, but anybody heard this story about it's raining spiders in Brazil? It was a big news story for a while. But in fact, spiders sometimes live in colonial aggregations, which are really fascinating. So spiders can be social. And in fact, you only find truly social spiders in tropical countries. Okay, so Brazil, Peru. I did my dissertation research in the Amazon, where I spent over a year in the jungle studying a social spider called Anelosimus exhibius, which is a truly social spider in that they build big aggregations and cooperate together. These guys just aggregate together, and they build orb webs. Each individual will build its own little web. And why do they aggregate? Well, they may be able to benefit from insect prey that ricochets off one web and hits the other, so they have some benefits that way. But really highly social spiders like Anelosimus are really fascinating. Some of the colonies of Anelosimus can be as big as, say, the size of a washing machine and contain about 2,000 to 3,000 spiders. Some of them that we worked on the edge of the lake would be the size of a Mack truck and contain like 200,000 spiders. Not dangerous, they're not going to kill you, not going to hurt you. I worked with these guys, collected them, they never bit me. They do.
Feed communally?
They do. In fact, it's a great setup for my next slide here. So big insect will fly into the web, and some of them will hold down the wings, and some of them will hold down the legs, and somebody's biting on the head. So they cooperatively capture their prey, which is fascinating for spiders. Okay, because remember I mentioned there are 40,000 species of spiders. Well, there's only a dozen or so that are this social, at most, maybe less. And the fact that they even tolerate each other in close proximity is really weird, because spiders are usually pretty aggressive, because anything is potential food. So they may cannibalize each other, and they're territorial and they're aggressive. So these guys have been wonderful model organisms for looking at the evolution of sociality. What allows animals to cooperate and live together as opposed to not tolerate each other? And there's great research that's being done by a number of people, Leticia Aviles, George Hood, Sam Ripstra, a lot of other people working with social spiders, Yael Lubin in Israel. Great model systems for looking at the evolution of sociality.
So, are they eating something in that picture? Is there something they're eating?
In this one or this one?
Whoa.
So you can see this big grasshopper here, right? See the eyes and the antenna, the jumping leg here.
Oh my goodness,
Now you see it? Okay, yeah, not the best pictures in the world, right? And these are all little spiders here. Okay, and they're so kind that the adults will back off after they subdue the prey and let the babies feed first. Juveniles feed. Then when the juveniles have fed, then the adults will take a meal, right? And then the females of these spiders will even regurgitatively feed their young, like birds do. So the mothers will feed the really tiny little spiderlings regurgitatively. So that's maternal care, right? So, and in fact, in these colonies, there's 10 females for every male. They're highly female associated, which has interesting consequences for the genetic relationships among the individuals within the colony that helps to foster, maybe to a certain extent, their social behavior.
Do these guys, when they find a big piece of prey like a grasshopper, do they lay any pheromones like ants to get the other spiders in the colony to follow them to the food source?
So spiders do produce a lot of pheromones as communication signals. But because these guys all live in a big web together, usually it's vibrational information that they use. So spiders rely a lot on the signals that get just the transmission of vibrations across the strands. So these guys are in there buzzing. I spent hours in the jungle watching colonies and waiting for insects to fall in, or throwing insects in of different sizes. And they would buzz, 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 and then they would come down and capture them, and we would record the numbers of individuals and what they were doing. And so, yeah, so they do use pheromones in other contexts, but not so much for prey capture, because they don't need to. Yep. Other questions about these guys? Social spiders are really cool. One of the things that I was studying were a different species of spider that would invade their webs because they're like sitting ducks, right? So they have all this great prey. So other kinds of things want to come in and steal it. So I worked with these what are called kleptoparasitic spiders, or food thieves, that would come in and try to steal the food away from the social spiders. And some interesting behavioral interactions there. I'm going to show you some of these guys too.
All the females, they're all active breeders, right? They're not super social like bees.
So that's a great question. So like in bee colonies, you have just like the queen that's doing all the reproduction, or a few queens, where most of the females are sterile. And in these cases, these guys, all of the females do produce young, although there's probably an asymmetry there. Some are producing more young than others. And that's enough to set up a difference and a bit of a hierarchy. There are dominant and subordinate individuals within the colonies. And there's a lot more to say about spider social colonies, and I'm glossing over here. They're not happily diploid, though, if that's what you're asking now.
Did these guys evolve earlier than ants and wasps and things like that? Is that normal?
So arachnids are more primitive than insecta for the most part, I believe, yeah. So, and then there's so much diversity in radiation that there's like parallel evolution of different groups, too.
So if you find a spider at home, there's more than one.
If you find a spider at home, there's more than one what?
There's more than one in that area.
Oh, of that kind?
Not
Probably.
that kind, but any kind.
Well, you mean in your house or around your yard? I mean, there are definitely spiders everywhere. There are probably some in this room here. They're outside, so if you found one, you're likely to find another. If you found one of a certain species, you're probably likely to find another of that species. Am I answering your question?
I'm thinking of the sociability.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So social spiders, again, we're not going to see those in New Hampshire. Okay, those real highly social spiders that live together in aggregations only live in tropical rainforests. So like in the Amazon, in Africa, and other places where you have tropical jungles. So, and here they don't occur. And there's, again, a lot of really interesting things to say about that and how sociality has evolved. We ask questions like, what are the conditions that allow for animals to tolerate each other at close proximity? There's like behavioral thresholds that had to be overcome. And the sharing of prey is probably one good thing. So like in the tropics, you don't just have grasshoppers, but you can have grasshoppers that are like 8-9 inches long, really big. So one individual could never capture that. So the large prey probably helped facilitate the evolution socially, along with a lot of other factors. That's one factor. And the abundance of food, both the abundance and the size. Great questions. Let's see here. So I was talking about these web-invading spiders, and so I work with a web-invading spider, Neospintharis trigonum, that Heather mentioned at the beginning. And these guys are pretty small, and they're very common in New Hampshire. You can find these guys if you look for them. They're small and they're brown, and I can teach you to find them pretty quickly. And here you can see one feeding on a housefly. You can tell how small they are. Okay, so they're pretty small. And in fact, they're versatile. They don't just steal prey. They do a lot of different things. And my research has been looking at all the different interactions. Sometimes they'll feed on the host, so they act as what we call an araneophage. Right? Or they steal prey, a kleptoparasite, or they kick the host out of the web and use the web for their own prey capture so they can be web stealers. Or they can sometimes build their own little web. It's not very complex, and they don't like to do it if they don't have to, but they can. You put them in a vial and nothing else around, they'll do it. And they'll capture an insect in it. Or they'll scavenge for things that are already dead. So they have this huge variety of behavioral options. And this behavioral versatility has been the focus of my research, kind of untangling the genetic and environmental influences that allow them to choose one strategy over another. And here's one that's feeding on a host spider. That's that hammock spider I showed you a while ago. And you can see that's an adult Neospintharis. Oh, come back, come back. We're getting to the good parts. Hopefully we'll come back because I have some really cool videos to show you too. comes to the tube. So, any questions about this, guys?
I had one question.
I'll just back that over. Yep, go
I
ahead.
did have a question about the large prey in the tropical areas.
Yep.
Do spiders ever develop into larger spiders in that area too?
Not so much. I mean, some of the big tarantulas are found there. You know, like in Papua New Guinea is where some of those big bird-eating tarantulas, they're called. They're like, could be like the size of a kitten. So they're pretty intimidating looking, but they're not dangerous. So you probably wouldn't want to be bitten by one, but you know, if you were, you wouldn't die. Okay. So this was just to show that there's a lot of factors that can influence foraging strategy in Neospintharis trigona. Okay. All right. So some spiders make sounds, which is pretty cool, and they do what's called stridulation. Does anybody know what stridulation is? It's kind of how crickets make sounds, right? They rub their wings together. It's kind of like a peg at a washboard. So they can move their abdomen up and down relative to the first body part, the cephalothorax, or they move their legs. And so these wolf spiders that I showed you earlier are great little stridulators, and they also tap their body on the surface of leaves. So you have to amplify it to be able to hear it, okay? But they make really cool sounds. And let's see if I can get this to work, and Heather's gonna get the volume turned way, way up so we can watch this male wolf spider in a courtship dance here. Keeps wanting to do
Why is it doing that?
I'll tell you in a second. You guys all hear it?
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? So why is it doing that? Well, it's a male. It's trying to court females. Okay, so they do these really cool courtship dances, and they tap on the leaves. And so this video is Dr. George Utz from the University of Cincinnati, who's done a lot of research with courtship behavior in these guys. His colleagues and his students have contributed a lot to that. So that's pretty cool. So males, like male birds, you know, they do crazy dances and try to attract females. Well, the same thing happens in spiders. Okay, and remember that pretty jumping spider I showed you? Very colorful to attract mates. I mentioned before, some spiders can watch TV, which is really pretty neat as well. This one doesn't have any sound associated with it, but these wolf spiders, you can show them images of crickets walking across the screen and they'll try to capture them. You can show them the pictures of females and they'll try to mate with them. It's amazing what they can see and how they'll react, and it's become a wonderful system for manipulating behavior because you got the same sequence, you can show it over and over to different individuals, and you can replicate your behavioral experiments that way. And let's see, this there's no sound on this one, so we don't have to worry about it, but this is just to show you, in this experiment, they were looking at how males actually eavesdrop on other males. Okay, so you see the males walking across the street, and this male's like saying, hey, what are you doing? Because I'm going to adjust my behavior relative to what others in the environment are doing. Then he's going to go over and check out male number 2 and say, what are you doing? Okay, so you can actually do choice experiments. They've done this, if I had videos with females where they pick one over the other. Okay, so it's like playback experiments. And people have done this for years with birds playing back sounds, you know, playing back videos. It's just really, but with spiders, you can have hundreds of replications. They're just great model systems for addressing behavioral questions. People say, why do you study spiders? This is one of the reasons. You can do so much great stuff with them, and you can learn so much about the natural world. Dave Clark at Alma College is one of the people that really did a lot of the initial work with this stuff. So you can take your iPod. They use iPods. They used to use Sony Watchmen. Now they use iPods, and they just set up all these screens and do this really cool stuff. It's really, isn't that great? So, as I mentioned, the bright colors of males attract females, just like with birds. You can always tell the male from the female because the females are boring and drab. The Habernatus, this one is in Lassen County, California. Dr. Wayne Madison, University of Arizona, has done a whole bunch of studies with looking at the biogeography, lots of different colored spiders in different areas, okay, and that they've been speciating based on their male courtship coloration and behavior. Just look at how cute these guys are. Who was saying ew before? Now they're saying, wow, those are cool. They're beautiful, beautiful spiders. And I'm going to show you, this one does have sound, so if the volume's up, that's good. This is going to show you some of the wild courtship behavior and sounds associated with a jumping spider. Whoops. Keep wanting to advance. Got the sound going? Not hearing it.
I've got it all the way up here. Is the video muted on the?
Oh, rats. I don't see why it would be. I hear it a little bit. It's too bad. Oh, that's better.
Just don't talk for a minute.
That part might be quiet. At least they have the video. It's too bad we're not hearing it.
Yeah. Can you turn your computer volume up anymore?
Sounds a little bit like Frank Sinatra.
They sound like a motorcycle that was like zzz, zzz, zzz. I'm really disappointed that it's not loud enough. So, but they have some really amazing sounds. These are research videos, not National Geographic. So they had that phenol glued to a Q-tip, so they try to entice the male. So, but anyway, it's too bad it didn't come out that well because in the beginning, that one guy's going voo, voo, and it really sounds like a motorcycle. They're really amazing. Again, it's all amplified. You wouldn't hear it without amplification. So one of the last things I want to show you, seen this one already? Oh, God. This is a video from YouTube that is about the peacock spider, which is a really extraordinary spider. This is the last thing I'm going to show you. I don't know how much time I'm using up here. Or just a few minutes.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Go from that.
Okay. There it is. I'm going to try to hardly touch it. I'm going to just, we'll see if it's loud enough. I'll let him narrate. This is the guy that works with them. And if not, I'll...
Hi.
Now it's loud.
In this forest near Sydney, in southeastern Australia, lives one of the most remarkable spiders on the planet. It's called peacock spider. It's not a big furry tarantula, it's a tiny little jumping spider. Here's one in my hand.
See how tiny that is?
This is the male. He's only 4 millimeters long, but extremely beautifully colored. And during the mating season, between September and November, he performs an extraordinary courtship dance to impress the female. Here it comes. Here's the male. He's looking around. He's trying to find a female.
So if you could hear it, he's tapping, and they're not amplifying the sounds he's making in this video, but he's making a ton of sound in addition to giving visual cues. Aren't they cute? I'd love to hear you say that because they're just adorable.
He advertises his presence.
Isn't that great? So I tell you, observing spiders is a wonderful thing.
This female is watching carefully. This one as well.
See how drab she is? Like birds.
Another female arrives on the scene.
Amazing.
The males are getting excited.
Suspense is building because we're getting to the good part pretty soon. And I don't mean the mating itself. That's not even on this video.
And the females too. At this stage, the male often vibrates his abdomen.
It's definitely stridulating even though you can't hear it. Wait for it.
Carefully and courageously, he makes his move. To get the female's attention, he often waves his
Look at me,
legs.
look at me, look at me.
That's hilarious.
But wait, there's more.
Isn't that incredible? They have an abdominal flap that they lift, and it's just an extraordinary thing.
There is really worse.
Isn't that great? Yeah, peacocks are so, they almost attracting the
That's
attention
why
of
they call
people.
it peacock.
That's what they call it, the peacock spider, yeah? Aren't they cool?
Then he dances in front of the female, quickly shaking his legs.
It's kind of like an Aztec pattern to it.
Yeah, doesn't it look sort of Native American or something? Yeah.
Can you see that without like zooming in on it? Can you see it?
Well, you could. They're small. Remember they showed him on his hand next to his ring? So you could probably see because your eyes are still good because you're young. But, you know, obviously they're zooming in with some photography here, but you could definitely see it without.
It's like a
People do
bird paradise
experiments where they
almost.
go in the field and look for them, or you can bring them into the lab. These guys can watch TV. A lot of jumping spider manipulations with television images.
Sometimes he stops,
iPod images.
just vibrating his abdomen.
Once we get going.
Bad luck. This female is not interested in mating.
Not good enough, buddy. Sorry. If you watch the whole, I kind of cut this one off, but if you watch the whole, and you can just Google or go to YouTube and put in peacock spider, you'll find this video. He'll show you where he's successful, and also you'll show you where he's so unsuccessful that he actually gets eaten by the female too. So again, it does happen. All right, and just so I just want to end with showing you there's other species of peacock spiders that have different colorations and patterns, and there's a whole sort of diversity and speciation based on male courtship and dancing. And
Are they
stuff,
all
so.
Australian?
I believe they're all in Australia, around the Sydney area, maybe out of there. So American Arachnological Society has a website. You can find a lot more information about spiders. Instead of just Googling spiders, look for our webpage, because this is the premier source in the country, if not the world, for information about spiders. And there's a great new field guide that's just been on the market just a couple of months now, The Common Spiders of North America, that the Society worked to finally publish by Rich Bradley. You can buy it on Amazon or at BioQuip. And it's a wonderfully illustrated field guide. The guy that did the postage stamps of the insects and spiders was our illustrator for the guide. And we also have a more technical guide to keying out spiders to the genus if you want to get out your microscope and really identify spiders properly instead of what's in this picture. You can use a field guide like that. So both of them can be purchased on Amazon if you're interested. So again, anything else that you want to know, just stick around. I can give you more details. And thanks for being here tonight. Yeah.
the North American spiders have a protecting thing like glycerin to protect their souls so that they can winter over?
Yeah, that's a great question. I also want to say anybody needs to leave, feel free to go. So a lot of spiders do produce glycerols as an overwintering strategy.
Right.
Other kinds of cryoprotectants, the way that some insects do.
Right.
Some of them just use sort of freeze avoidance strategies by just kind of burrowing into the
Right.
ground and stuff like that, or a little bit of ice nucleating proteins and dehydration kind of stuff. Mhm.
What is that spider up in the upper right? Is that now?
This one here? You ever seen these guys? You can find them around here.
No.
Yeah, it's also an orb weaving spider in the genus Microthena. So they have these kind of spiny abdomens.
That's
But,
his abdomen.
They're pretty cool. Yeah, that's the abdomen. Here's the cephalothorax. That's the abdomen. And you can find them.
They're around here.
You can see them. Yeah. Not common in some places. I've seen probably more of them in Central and South America. Yep.
What about the tensile strength of the silk?
Yeah. So, have everybody heard that, like, the strongest fiber known to man? So, for its molecular weight, it is one of the strongest fibers that's out there. And so, the military has had interest in this. And so, there are people and companies that have tried to, synthesize spider silk because of its strength relative to its molecular weight. And I don't know a lot about that research, but I do know people have been looking at spider silk properties because of how strong it is. So, yeah, and like maybe bulletproof vests and things like that.
I think they're still using spider silk for focusing huge telescopes.
Yeah, like using the hairs
Yeah,
because they're
yeah.
so fine. And again, they're strong, like they'll stay in place.
Right.
So they use them for the crosshairs in weapons. And stuff.
Right.
We're going to think of the other uses for spiders.
Is there any evidence that spiders, like their cousins, ticks, are moving more northward in recent years? I mean, it seems to be when we're plotting
Like climate change
diseases,
kind of thing, or?
it seems that ticks have moved considerably, and even different species have come further north over the last 10 or 20 years. And I'm wondering if there's any evidence that spiders...
I think there have been some people that have looked at climate effects on populations of different species. So you can't make a broad brush comment about all spiders because there are so many different species and how they may respond to climatic differences. So people have looked at some of the geographic shifts in distributions of some species, not necessarily to the north.
Right.
I don't really know a whole lot about that.
Sure.
But I'm sure that with climate change, which is definitely happening, all kinds of species are changing their distributions, and there's no reason to think that spiders wouldn't be doing that as well to some extent. But I'm not sure how well it's been documented yet. Yeah.
In that same vein, is there a general health to the world population or not so much?
You mean as far as are they being threatened and stuff like that? Yeah. So I mean, it's hard to say. I think that I don't know that there's like an increased number of species on the endangered list since so many decades ago. Partly because people haven't tracked them as carefully as they have other species. And the predominant number of spider species as well as insect species are in the tropics. So they're still kind of hanging out there, and the estimates are kind of more generalized. So invasive species, I mentioned that invasive linniphiid. Invasive species are probably the number one problem that's causing all species, in fact, for species that are endangered or threatened are primarily due to habitat destruction in invasive species. And it was usually habitat destruction was number one, and now invasive species is coming ahead of habitat destruction for affecting species. So I'm making very generalized comments because I'm not really sure.
Now, I'm pretty sure I was cold sober when I read this, and it was maybe 3 years ago, and I believe it was in Science News.
Okay.
I was talking about scorpions.
Okay.
Is it true that some 360 million years ago, there was a scorpion that approached 8 feet long?
Well, there definitely were arthropods that approached 8 feet long. So they may have said they were scorpion-like Okay, so, and those were probably in the ocean.
Right, it was an
Okay.
ocean scorpion, as I
Okay,
read.
so because it looked sort of scorpion-like, they,
Oh.
in a book called it an ocean scorpion, right?
Oh.
So there were arthropods that were in the oceans, and obviously life evolved in the oceans before it moved terrestrially. And so there were definitely crustacean-like animals, like isopods and other kinds of marine crustaceans that got that big, for sure.
See, so, but arachnids don't
Trilobites,
have the limits to
riptidals.
size that, say, insects have. Something where I vaguely remember that they can't, the biggest insect ever was a
Right.
dragonfly or something, 2.5 feet long.
So there's a whole different set of rules for when you're in the water and when you're on land, for how big you can get, because the water gives you buoyancy and you can hold you up all day long, so you can get really big in the ocean.
Right.
Once you're on land, now you gotta hold your body
Right,
up, and the
gravity.
weight starts to go up with size and all that, so there's still limits. I mean, spiders, you know, even like tarantulas are about as big as they get, because the exoskeleton starts to get too heavy. You know, and so a lot of the body of the tarantula, the abdomen is not covered by as much exoskeleton, as thick of exoskeleton as the legs and stuff are, so they get around that a little bit. And then a lot of it just has to do with oxygen, you know, so they have book lungs that they breathe and the number of spiracles that they take in oxygen with and that kind of
Right.
stuff.
So as you're standing up there watching your shadow on the screen, and I see, thank you. But I see, at one point, your shadow did this sort of thing, which makes me think of spiders when
Okay.
it goes like.
I really am a spider.
So this is a defensive position when they.
Okay, so spiders can sort of rear up like that.
Right.
And raise the chelicera, which are where the fangs are
That's where the
attached.
action is.
And and it's defensive, you
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah,
don't
okay.
eat me, because birds will feed on spiders and
Yeah.
everything, so they can definitely defend themselves in that kind of a defensive posture. Yeah,
You know what kind of spider this is?
what's that?
We have an unidentified spider here. Do you know what it is?
I can try.
It's pink and yellow.
Yeah, so sometimes like, and if you go to the website, one of the great ways to try to identify a spider, if you go to about arachnids, they'll say how to help you identify your spider. And one of the things they'll say is that color is really a bad way. That can be true. And often you need a microscope to see some of the details, like you're counting the number of bristles. But I can try to get close, like a family name or something. Sometimes people will say, "What's a spider? What's a spider?" I really want to know, and then 2 days later they don't remember. So
I grew up in
let me take a look
Florida and
at
saw
it.
a lot of creepy crawlies, but never one that really that pretty.
Oh, that's a crab spider. Yeah, which is a family of spiders. Yeah, and they're beautiful. They hang out in flowers. It's a beautiful crab spider if you want to pass it around. That one's yellow. Sometimes you see white, and they're sit-and-wait predators, and they'll hang out on a flower that's like yellow or white and just wait for insects to come. So they blend into their background pretty well, not because they can see so well, but because the insects do. Right, so that's a crab spider, and they hold their legs out more sort of dorsal-ventrally. It's called like a crab instead of down like that. So that is a crab spider. I can't tell you the exact species. Colleagues that could, but I can tell you at least it's a type of crab spider, and there are many species of crab spiders.
We saw that. We
Cool.
I grew up in Florida, and we had a lot of interesting.
That's great. Yeah,
things
you can
out
find
there.
crab spiders in New Hampshire too, though.
Yeah. I'm finding that out.
Yeah, cool. Other questions, or everybody get tired? Use up more than my allotted time.
The biggest surprise for me is that there are no brown recluses in New England.
Are you disappointed? Darn! Darn!
That shocks me.
Doesn't really, yeah, it's really funny. People they're sure, and a lot of people argue with me. I mean, I've been an arachnologist for decades and say, yes, there are.
I'm that blows away a case that I had heard of when I was working in a hospital in Maryland. That I was on orthopedic unit, and there was a woman, they said, nearly lost her arm because of the spider bite.
Probably some other thing. I would almost bet it was from some other thing. That's right. And physicians say, I don't know what the hell it is, must be a spider. It's really bad. They're helping to perpetuate